Hi everyone, welcome to the fourth video on pronunciation. Pronunciation in the context of IELTS means the ability to be understood clearly when using the sounds of the language. This includes being able to use different variations in your pronunciation to communicate different kinds of meaning. When did you get so smart? Obviously he read the criteria. Or just my part of the script. Sorry. How is it assessed anyway? A high pronunciation score in IELTS requires candidates to communicate clearly and use a variety of patterns in their pronunciation as required. The key words which appear in the criteria are features, intelligibility and understood, and mispronunciation. Those are some banned 9 words, if you use them accurately, of course. Let's have a closer look, shall we? Individual sounds are the most basic parts of English speech, and you can see them all clearly on a phonemic chart. If you can't see certain sounds clearly when speaking about certain topics, then you cannot be understood, and your score will be lower. So you don't need to say everything perfectly all the time. That's not so stressful. Not if it's clear what you're talking about and it doesn't affect the clarity on the subject of stress. In speaking, stress is the natural pronunciation of certain parts of words or words and sentences with more emphasis, that means with a higher volume, than other parts. If you do not stress the correct words or parts of words, then you will sound unnatural, like a robot, and the score will be lower. And sometimes changes to the meaning of the word in the sentence are connected with the stress. Exactly! On the subject of things being connected, in English, when we speak, the sounds of words in a sentence sometimes join together and we produce them as one item. If this cannot be done correctly, speech will sound messy or robotic and your score will be affected. I don't like your tone. Feeling is mutual. Speaking of tone. In English, the voice should rise and fall in regular ways to send the message more effectively. This is called intonation. If it does not, it can be difficult to determine how a speaker feels about a situation or the message they want to send. Don't look at me, I'm just standing here. No input from me this time. Lastly, in English, speech is broken up into sections. The same happens when people write. We can see this in the use of collocations or other groups of words, but we also pause in places to allow the listener to catch up. If this does not happen, it can sound like the speaker is talking to a wall and too much information can be given in one time. This is important because the examiner is trying to assess what you are saying, and you do not want to sound like you are giving a memorized speech. This list of features can be quite worrying for many candidates, especially if they have not heard them before. However, do not panic. You do not need to have 100% control of them 100% of the time. No one does, not even native level speakers. Hey, not even native level speakers. What actually matters is intelligibility. That is, can you be understood clearly from what you are saying and how you are saying it? If you say ship instead of sheep, then usually it will be clear what you mean from the context. Let's talk about mispronunciation.
Excuse me? Who's that?
These dad jokes are getting old. This is when you pronounce a word incorrectly. Individual words can be mispronounced and usually it will be clear what is being spoken about. However, if you mispronounce many words or certain types of word consistently, this is a problem and will reduce the score for pronunciation. What about accent? Should I sound like someone from the UK or the USA to get a higher score? I've heard people say that British pronunciation is better. Actually, no. Before we move on to talk about what you need for the speaking test, it's important to point out what you don't need for the speaking test. Accent is not assessed in IELTS. Speaking with perfect received pronunciation or a stereotypical accent will not help you get a higher score. What is important is that your accent does not obscure the meaning of what you're saying. For example, Russian and Chinese speakers can speak with their own accents, but they must speak clearly. For Chinese speakers, this means pronouncing sounds clearly. For Russians, this usually means speaking with a variety of intonation patterns. For a good score in IELTS, you should be able to pronounce almost all the sounds in English clearly. There will be some sounds which are more difficult for speakers of other languages. For example, the and e sounds for Russian speakers. If you have a good grasp of most sounds, but are aiming for a high score, then it's a good idea to find the more difficult sounds and practice them until the issues with them are not so large. It's important that candidates know how a word is stressed in itself and a sentence to convey different kinds of meaning. They should also know which word should be stressed in a particular sentence to convey a particular idea. Candidates should also be able to connect words in the most common way. For example, articles are often unstressed and merged with other words that are near them.
I'm bored.
Fine, why don't you have a go? Intonation is difficult to learn and classify, but it should be clear the meaning the candidate is trying to convey. With this in mind, question intonation, various intonations for expressing emotions and attitudes, and being able to vary intonation while speaking for a long time will be very useful, like I did here. Like intonation, chunking is also difficult to learn. However, candidates should remember who they are talking to and why, aiming to structure what they say to the examiner so that the examiner has time to process what has just been said and respond, if required, just like I did here. By doing all or most of the above, you will be intelligible and easily understood. There are obviously no requirements for mispronunciation, so being able to articulate everything you say clearly will be essential for this. You can, of course, practice saying individual sounds in English, but it will be much better to have an awareness of how the spelling and pronunciation of words are connected to each other. Similarly, pronouncing words when you first hear them will help with this. The same ideas will also help with the pronunciation of different kinds of stress. You can do this in class with your teacher and they will understand, but make sure you explain exactly what you are doing if you practice this outside of class.
Can I have a go?
Sure, why not? Okay. Repetition works well for connected speech too. You can experiment with this and ask for feedback from the teacher. They will show you how this works effectively. You can also try with friends. Speak quickly and check they can understand what you mean. Intonation is difficult to study and teach, but for simple examples like question intonation, it's easy to track and notice with active thought. As with the previous points, openly experiment and seek feedback. Once it's clear what you should do, then you can focus on that. You can do the same with chunking. We hope you've enjoyed these short videos on preparation for the IELTS speaking exam. I'll see you in classes where we can put them all to work, and you can always ask me questions on Instagram or other social media to help get the score that you want, whether it's a band 5 to 6 or an 8 to 9. Now maybe I can pull myself back together.